We are totally live. Hello, friends. So I'm excited to do office hours today. Woo! Let me grab the YouTube live stream here and stick that in our Discord chat. So let me also share screen. So this is office hours. If you've never been a part of office hours before, you're in for a treat. Office hours is your opportunity to ask me anything and I will do my best to answer. Yeah, it's basically a nice way for me to put all the questions in one place so I can answer as many questions as I can, and then I can focus on getting other work done throughout the week. So that's why it started. And I don't promise to always give the best answer, the right answer necessarily, but I do promise to do my best. And so, yeah, the way that this works is I give priority to people who are actually in the Zoom call. And then I go through the Discord and answer questions as we go. And it looks like this is, we fixed that actually. So Lois has a question, and that's going to be the first one I answer in the Discord. But we've got a couple of people in Zoom. So go ahead. Anybody in Zoom have a question? Okay, so that's totally fine. You're welcome to hang out in the Zoom. It's a more fun way to experience office hours anyway. So I'll just go through this. Feel free, if you're in the Zoom, to interrupt me and we can answer questions that way. So let's start with this one. Just joined the Discord, love Epic React. And what I've done is testing JavaScript. That's great. Must be busy. I was wondering if you would be able to help me understand how best to unit test compound components via context, please. If for context, this is a radio group context, no pun intended, I'm sure. This is a radio group library for React. I understand from your fantastic content, thanks by the way, that we should test our software by the way our users use it. So I've started writing tests at radio group parent component level. Great. Personally, rightly or wrongly, I'd be interested to hear your opinion. I like to keep everything relevant to the test close to it, like the first example here. Okay, so we've got our heading, renders heading text. We've got our text right there. We render that. We verify that the text is the same and it's in the document. That's awesome. Okay, yeah, and then we've got our default text there, and then loads of other tests and miles from the heading tests. Then we do this. Okay. Because of the nature of compound components and how coupled they are, I'm struggling to set my tests up nicely and I'm a bit stuck. Basically, I feel as if I'm injecting random values in a test, which makes me feel uneasy. I just noticed that code there. What do you think? Yeah, okay. So yes, I'm totally on board with this. You want to keep things close. Co-location is good. I'm not sure where the struggle is from the compound components situation, but you shared some tests here, so I can review these for you. So we've got a bunch of default values and whatnot here. Radio with level or with label, and then down here you pass those default values. Okay. Yeah, so here's what and so you're like all the way down here and you're like, well, what the heck is this default selected value thing all about? I don't know. So for one, I would say like this probably isn't a big deal. I wouldn't really worry about this. It's like most of the time, well, yeah. So most of the time you look at this, you learn it once, and then you're good to run throughout the rest of the test. Even if you've got thousands of tests, when I read this, I say, okay, so I need to check that it sets the expected attributes. So I've got a name, value, and ID. And so I'm going to set the radio group name, and then the selected value is just the default selected value. Like it's irrelevant for the test. It's just like what you would expect for the default selected value to be. So I don't really need to actually know what that value is because it's irrelevant to the test. And so, yeah, I personally wouldn't really worry about this much. But if you wanted to, you could make a function component up here that is responsible for rendering the radio group and the radios. and it accepts props and then has default values. And so then you come down here and you just render like actually in the total default case, you just literally render the component and all the defaults would take place. And then down here, you would only have to pass the name and you wouldn't have to pass these other values because you would just rely on the defaults there. So that would be like one alternative of something you can do. Another thing that I thought about is testing. So this blog post might be helpful and relevant to you. I feel like there's another one, nesting when you're testing might be relevant also. I feel like there's another one. I think testing is the one I'm thinking about though. Yeah. So this actually you probably will relate pretty well to this one. So give those blog posts a read. Let me just mention answering this in the live stream now. And there you go. Hopefully that's helpful to you. Okay, sweet. Great question. And again, those in Zoom, feel free to interrupt me, but like, oh, that's actually literally the last question. Here we have, oh, sweet. We have Jens here. I'm pretty sure that's how you say that. In Dutch, I'm pretty sure J's are pronounced like Y's in the US. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think it's Jens. Yeah. Would you call someone crazy for still using session flash and redirect it with remix nowadays? No, that's totally fine. Specifically referring to the difference between above mentioned approach and returning action data when it comes to Node.js support. So returning action data actually does work with Node.js. Yeah, like it will work. So you know my remix jokes tutorial. And if we go here and we want to add our own and we skip this stuff, so that's returning action data. So if I refresh and I say, let's disable JavaScript. So we're refreshed. There's no JavaScript on the page. All that failed to load, whatever. Like that, no JavaScript, I'm returning action data and it still works. So, I mean, if I, and even if I refresh the page, then like that's also, it's going to repost because how I got onto this page was a post. So when I say refresh, it's literally just do this thing again. And oh my goodness, it took 50 milliseconds. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's not like a big app or anything, but like, wowza, that is cool. That's a full go to the server, come back and get it and or render it all and send it back. Like, man, what a time to be alive. So yeah, anyway, like you can totally use return stuff from action data. Now, if you do enable JavaScript here and we refresh, and then I say, we do this, or actually, you know what, this, because I had JavaScript disabled, this will mess it up. So we'll refresh right here. We're on the page, and then I say, hit that, and then I refresh. Then because JavaScript is enabled, when I did this submission, that was a fetch request that was made. It was not a full page refresh and a post and all of that. So when I do the refresh, it's going to say, oh, okay, you just want me to repeat this request again. And so I will. And that request was a get. And so that's why you're not seeing the error messages in there. And to me, that's actually that's a better experience because I think that the browser is doing the best that it can. But I think that this is what we call progressive enhancement, where we say, you have JavaScript enabled, and so therefore I can do something better than what the browser could do by itself. And so in our case, what's better is when the user wants to refresh, they don't want to resubmit the form, right? Most of the time when the user wants to hits refresh, it's because something is wrong and they just want to start from scratch. And so I would argue that a refresh that resets all the fields and everything is a better user experience. And so that's why I'm not so worried about the difference between the JavaScript there. But yeah, to get back, because I only mention all of that because I know you're thinking about this a lot. To get back to your original question, you can totally use action data with JavaScript disabled, and it works. Another thing is, I think it's fun that you're working so much on the Node.js support thing, but I think you might be going a little overboard. Yeah, like there are definitely situations where people like things don't work without JavaScript, or where the JavaScript fails to load or something. And most of the time you're going to be fine. And so you're putting a lot of effort into making it always work without JavaScript. And I think that's great, but I wonder if maybe your effort could be better spent on other parts of the user experience. But I don't know what your situation is and what you're going for. So yeah, so let's talk about, yep, sweet, got it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually had a
You
question.
changed your profile picture. I didn't even realize that was you.
Yo. Anyway, I actually kind of wanted to keep this a bit of a secret, but I am currently working on a React renderer for Discord messages, and I wanted to write integration tests for that. So my current approach is using an actual Discord channel to actually render the messages to, and then I pull the messages from the channel via the REST API to check that they're actually being created with the right content. And I was just wondering if maybe you would approach that differently, like maybe even mock it, or how would you
Yeah.
approach
So
something like that?
in your integration test, do you have like an actual test server?
It's not a test server. It's like actually hitting the Discord API and like actually working with an actual Discord server and
Yeah.
channel.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you get a crazy amount of confidence doing that, right? Because
Yeah.
it's the whole thing, and that's like an end-to-end test sort of thing. And so that's good. And I have often thought that it would be nice for my bot to actually interact with a real server. You can actually, in the server settings, there's somewhere in here where you can, oh yeah, server template, where you can like create a template out of your current server. And so I've looked at this before. I'm like, I really kind of want to do this, so I can make a test server that I can run my tests against that real server. The biggest problem there, of course, is your tests will be slow, and potentially flaky, like if things fail, because Discord is not with like they don't care about your tests.
Yeah.
And so that like they do care about like not being flaky. But yeah, so like there's some potential for issues there, but like you get a lot of confidence out of that. And to drive this home even further, my Discord bot mocks out like everything for interactions with the server, and it does it in a really great way with MSW. Marco set that up. I can't remember his last name, but he's in the server. He's great, and it's brilliant. The problem is that Discord JS 13 changed a ton of stuff, and we don't just use MSW. We mock out several other things as well, and like we need to create a new guild and create users and all of this stuff, and we're using like private APIs in Discord JS version 12. And so version 13, they changed so much stuff, and they also locked things down so you can't access private things. And so we're still on version 12 because I haven't had time to figure out how to fix my testing situation so that I don't have to do all that garbage.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if I were in your position, you're kind of where I want to be. So I would not change.
All right.
I mean, like you also like you're probably experiencing some pains, which is making you think, oh, maybe I should switch. But your pains are not as bad as mine.
Yeah, like I actually was encountering a bit of that flakiness. Like I had to like await for like my renderer to like actually upload everything in order to like
Mm,
do the assertions. And I think right now I have a pretty reliable way of doing that. But like if Discord has downtime issues, then all of a sudden my tests can't run.
right.
So it's like
Yeah.
yeah, trade-offs,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
Like it's neither one is great. And this is a tale as old as time. Like it's not just Discord bots, it's like everything. It's like, should
Right.
I do a full end-to-end thing, or would it be okay to mock a bunch of stuff? And these are the exact same trade-offs that you have no matter what. Um, yeah, Discord JS in particular is just pretty complicated. And so in this situation, I feel like, I mean, you could also go the total opposite direction and just make a bunch of little functions and unit test the heck out of them and just hope they integrate. That's not what I would do, but some people do that.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to test the actual functionalities, which is why I went with this approach to begin with. So.
Yeah. I think you're probably in the least bad situation. So I would stick with what you're doing.
Oh, cool, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the insight.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, cool. So, yeah, it looks like I did answer the question. I'm gonna jump. I know there are a couple other questions in here, but I want to jump back to Jens's question to continue this thought here. So when the user refreshes, they don't want to resubmit the form, but without JS, there's no way to get that behavior. Yeah, I mean, it is possible. Like you could make this work, not with JS disabled, but like if you're worried about, well, what if these JavaScript files fail to load for some reason? If that's what you're worried about, then you can make this work by inlining a script that's that will refresh the page. I'm not sure if there's a way to detect no. So what you could do is your action data. Yeah, if your action data is defined on the server render, then you could have a little script that forces no, if it refreshes, it'll just repost. It could do a navigation to the current route. So you'd just say window location equals or .href equals window location href. Pretty sure that would just do a reload, but a get reload. Pretty sure. But yeah, that still requires JavaScript. I don't think that there's a way. I don't know. Maybe there's something you can do on the server with a redirect. Yeah, this is not something that I'm aware of. I honestly, I wouldn't worry about it unless you're just doing it for fun. Yeah, you just want to understand things. Yeah, and I think that's great. This is precisely the reason that you should be asking these questions, is you want to learn more about it. So no, I'm not annoyed, but it is yeah, new ground for me also. I think it should be possible, and if you figure it out, let me know. Okay, sweet. Let's get back to Garrett here. When working with nested routes, the following structure, the outlet goes in the ID, but what goes in the index file? Confused. All right, sweet. So we've got a routes directory with an events, and inside of events, we have an ID. And so this ID will be in the route. And if you're on the ID slash, well, okay, so this ID route here is going to render an outlet, which is what you said. The outlet goes in the ID. So this will have an outlet that says, okay, I've got my layout stuff, and then here's where the children should go. And so if I'm on events/ID, then it's going to render the index. If I'm on events/ID/details, then the details is what's going to go into the outlet. I'm guessing this is a typo, Garrett, but you're probably going to want an X at the end of that file name. If you don't already have it, maybe that's why you're experiencing some problems. So that's why I mentioned it. But yeah, so we're confused about where the exact route UI goes. So yeah, so basically when you're thinking about, okay, should I put the UI inside of this ID, or should I put it inside of this index? Just think about what do you want? What part of the UI do you want to have shared between the index and the details and all of the other children? If there's shared UI between all of the children, then that should just go in the parent. So the only part that, and that's like the least common parent of the UI. So if you have like a shared drop down over here and a drop down over here, and there's like stuff in between it, then yeah, that can't go in the parent, because the parent is like this whole thing, and then it wraps just like the little nested part. And so yeah, so it's everything that you want shared around the nested part is what goes in the parent. And then we can also do layout routes. So let's say you had like 6 children in here, and all of them have this shared stuff, except for this one is going to do something different. Then that's when you use the double underscore, what are we calling it? It's the layout route without, shoot, we're updating the docs right now. And I will find what we are, how we're referring to it. Yep, update route conventions. There we go. We're calling it layout routes without URL segments. We need to think about that name a little more. But yeah, so like this is a layout route, but then if you have a double underscore layout route, as this documentation describes, then that will allow you to say, I have this layout that's shared by all these children, but I don't want that part in the URL. And so if you had a bunch of children in here that all shared the same layout, but then you needed to add another one that only shares part of it, then you could actually make a layout route without a URL segment, so the double underscore, and put all of the children that share all that layout into that one, and then the one that doesn't share the layout but does share the rest of the URL could be outside of that. So anyway, that's how you think about where to put UI code is what part of this is going to be shared with all of the other children. What part of it is the layout and what part is like the one piece that's different from each other child. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, sweet. It does make sense. Good. Victory. Okay, Zach, let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. Yeah. Zach, did you end up completing a demo of Remix and Framer Motion for a modal? I had to jump off. Yeah, so I did. So after I wrapped up with Ryan, I think, yeah, I was still on the live stream when I figured out the solution. It is kind of funny, but it totally works. Let me think where I put that. Where was I working on that? Hold on. Nope, it wasn't in here. Where was that? I know I shared it with Chance. So let me find it and I will share it with you all. Yep, here it is. Yeah, so this isn't a PR on the Remix. It's the Kent modal example. So I will paste that into Discord. And I will show you how it works. So it's kind of ridiculous, but like when you're doing ridiculous things, you have to do ridiculous things, right? So we've got app. Yeah, I think it's, where did I put it? Login, here it is. Okay, so the way that this works is here you have this nice animation, it looks sweet, whatever. And the URL is not getting updated on here, but I'm pretty sure. Oh man, that's annoying. Okay, sweet. URL gets updated here. So we're on app/login, and I want to be able to make it so that this page will work without JavaScript, and so I can refresh. And I also don't want to have any animation when I land on this page, right? So it makes sense to have animation on this client transition, but it doesn't make sense to have this animation when I land on the page. Like that is just weird to me. I want it to be like right there. And if you have an animation, when you animate something in, when the page loads, you also have to wait for the JavaScript to load, which it may never. So if I refresh here, it actually will render it right here. And of course I could style it to make it look exactly the same, but I'm not. So anyway, that's the way that that looks. So yeah, that totally works and it's awesome. And the way that and so you can go back and then you can go to login and it will animate that time. And you can also make it so that when you land on this page, server rendered, when you click go back, it will actually animate out too. So like all of that will work. The way that it works is kind of funny, but like it actually makes total sense. We have a DOM element or a React element that we're rendering with an ID. And when we're coming, the big challenge that we faced when I was working on this with Ryan was, how do I know when this component renders that I am rehydrating? I don't, like, it's hard to know. Like, how do I know that I'm rehydrating? I know, like, I can either be server rendering or I could be client rendering during like a client transition, or I could be hydrating. Those are the three situations that can be happening right here. And so We know if we're server rendering, it's because window isn't defined. We know if we're hydrating or client rendering because window will be defined, but we can't distinguish between one of those two. Am I hydrating or client rendering just through a client transition? The way we figure this out is if I can use the DOM, or if I can't use the DOM, then I know that I'm server rendering. And so in that case, I want to, yeah, I only want to render in the render in a dialog if I can use the DOM, so I'm on the client and I'm not hydrating. So this is how I determine that I'm hydrating, is if there's already a modal title in the document. So I've the DOM has already come and I can already query it at this point. If that is the case, if it's already there, then I know that I'm hydrating. And that's it. So you just have something in the document and you can determine that. You could probably query for, well, yeah, it has to be something that this component is rendering. So if something this component is rendering is already in the document, then you know you're hydrating. And this is happening within a use state callback or initialization, because this will only run before the component's actually rendered. So if it's already in there and the component hasn't rendered yet, we know we're hydrating. So anyway, and then that's how you know if I should render, or probably a better variable name for this would be like, why did that not work? Huh, that's annoying. Where is it? My cursor. Oh, I don't know why, but my cursor is not working. Huh. Anyway, a better name for that would be like is client transition. Yeah. Yep. Is client transition. So if it is a client transition, then we can render it in the dialog with the animation and everything. Otherwise, we're just going to render the regular UI, which is just like the login form and stuff. And again, you could also style it so it looks like it's in the dialog and everything. And then you could animate it out and stuff. In fact, yeah, there are probably a couple of things that we could do here to make it look a little nicer. But anyway, that's how I solved that. That was awesome. It was fun. Okay. Frau is saying, I started using Remix for a startup I'm working on. Sweet. You're going to love it. It's awesome. Yeah, did I miss the answer or is it coming soon? Yes, you missed it. You can scrub back on the video. It was the very first question I answered. How would you go about implementing infinite scrolling and pagination with Remix? Okay, so I haven't, I need to publish this as an example or like put it in something. Let's see. Infinite, nope, that's not going to be there. I have it locally, but I'm pretty sure that I had it in a Stack Blitz as well, that I probably shared with Ryan. Let me just find it. Here we go. Right there. There we go. And so this is missing two things, which is why it's not yet been merged. One of them was actually fixed. It was a requirement in the React Virtual, which is what we're using for the infinite scroll. Because React Virtual before recently, it would only render 2 of your items on the server render, just for some reason. And that's because it doesn't know how many to render, because it doesn't know how big the view or the window is going to be. And so I suggested, hey, like if I have a pretty good idea of about how many there will be, could I just specify? And they added support for that, and I just haven't updated for that yet. So that's the one thing. The other thing was there's not currently a way built into Remix to restore scroll for your scroll position on elements within the page. So it'll restore your scroll position for elements that are here. And actually, let me grab this here and I'll share this with you folks on Discord. Oh, where is it? There we go. Yeah. So this Remix will restore your scroll position for like the entire page, but not on elements within the page. So if you like scroll down a thing and then you hit refresh, there's no way currently to restore that element scroll position, and we want to be able to support that. And so that's the piece that's not supported yet. But let me show you this. It's really awesome. So as I'm scrolling, we're actually getting an update to our URL that says, where our start and what our limit should be. So I'm rendering a bunch of items at once. And you can see the scroll bars over there, and I can like go nuts with this. Whoa. And you can look at my URL. It's going crazy. Yeah, there's nothing to see here that you're seeing pop up. I should probably improve that, but and I think I busted it too. It was going, yeah, you see the URL got messed up, but yeah, we fixed it now. So hopefully your users don't do that, or that we could probably fix that too. But anyway, it's pretty wild. And what's really, really cool about this, I wasn't actually planning on demoing this today, but I'm going to show you something really, really awesome about this. So once we support being able to restore your scroll position on elements within the page on a refresh, then this will be really awesome, because I've got the scroll that like the elements that I want on the page. Now, of course, like you don't have to do it this way. If you've got like a bunch of scroll things, you may not want to have all of those update the URL. So this is mostly just a demo, something that you could do for a particular user experience that you're looking for. And also you could do the same thing without updating the URL. You could set it in the session. So like that also is an option for you. So maybe you wouldn't want to do that, even if you had a bunch of them. Like, can you imagine you have like a bunch of infinite scroll things on the screen, you scroll them all like crazy, and then you hit refresh and it restores their scroll position and the elements that were in the page, and it server renders like that? What? Yeah, that would be cool. And that is totally possible once Remix supports restoring scroll position for elements in the page. So anyway, if I refresh right now, it's going to shoot me up to the top. And that's what I'm talking about. That's not awesome. But let me show you why this is so excellent. This is really cool. And this is not something that you get when you use the typical infinite scroll that you get from like React Query or SWR or anything like that. They have support for these things, but you will not get this from those things. And that is, as I scroll, you'll notice these requests are coming. Oh man, it's coming from a server server. Maybe I should run it locally. 1 second. Because it's way cooler if I show you this. Remix if you scroll. Okay, so I've got it running locally now. Local host 3000. Okay, so same thing, works exactly the same. And you'll notice that if I scroll back, oh, and I got to enable the cache. Spoiler alert. Okay, so we're scrolling, and you'll notice these are all coming from the disk cache. What? They're coming from the disk cache? What is that? And then as and this favicon thing is super annoying. I can't remember what that. Yeah, there was something weird going on as I was scrolling. It's updating the head, which triggers. I can't remember why it's updating the head. There was something weird about the head getting updated, so it triggers a favicon request, and I can't remember why. So that's what all these favicons are about. It's super annoying. I don't think that's a Remix thing, but if it is, we'll fix it. But anyway, you'll notice like a bunch of these are not cached. Those aren't coming from the disk cache. But if I go back, then they are. Okay, so I've got a cache control header on this. And so like you can scroll like nutsos on this, and it's coming from the cache. And then if you scroll past that, then it's not coming from the cache. Like that makes sense. But then you scroll back and it's coming from the cache again. Like that's really cool. And so like, here's why it's so cool, because all the other solutions for this are going to go and request the data, and they're going to stick it into their in-memory cache. And then you scroll down and you put like hundreds of thousands of things into their cache, and they're like, oh, snap. And then you report a bug on it because like people's experience is really slow as they keep on scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and they like have tons and tons of items in their in-memory cache. And this is not something that the original writers of the library thought about, where people would be nuts and scroll and get tons of data into that cache. And so you report a bug and you say, hey, things are getting really slow. And so then they say, oh, okay, well, I'll just add some garbage collection mechanism so that like we ditch this from the garbage collection stuff, right? And so that's how they solve the caching thing. Like we solve it by putting it in in-memory cache and you can scroll back and everything's right there. They solve it by just sticking it in their JavaScript cache, but then they have to worry about garbage collection. We don't have to worry about garbage collection because we're using the browser's cache and the browser's already thought about that for us. And so it will ditch stuff from the cache as needed. And with the in-memory cache, they just have to kind of come up with what they think makes sense for everybody, because they're not going to just like, they don't know enough about the device to know like how much memory should I be allocating, but the browser does, and the browser is going to know when the right time to ditch stuff is. So on my MacBook, where I've got like tons and tons of space, and the browser's probably like, oh man, I'm just swimming in this money of memory. So it's probably not ditching stuff from the cache as much. But if I pull out my phone and I start scrolling on this thing, then yeah, the phone browser will probably be like, oh, I don't got much space, I better ditch this stuff from the cache. And so it's optimized really well in either case. And I'm just scrolling for fun because it's fun to do this, and it'll just go forever. But that is what's really cool about this approach. And could you do this with React Query or SWR? Maybe. Like you'd have to basically tell it to not do what it does, which is like stick things into an in-memory cache. So yeah, you could, if they have the ability to do that, or like you have some mechanism for saying, hey, don't leave it in the in-memory cache for or invalidate immediately or something. I don't know. They may have, and like, would it be possible? Yes, like they could alter their libraries to make it do this. But this is the sort of thing that you need both like client and server to work in tandem for this sort of thing experience to work. And this took me no time at all. I was like, oh yeah, I could probably do it this way. And I did. And I was like, wow, that took 2 seconds to figure out. So anyway, we've got a lot of items. And that is infinite scroll with Remix. As far as pagination is concerned, that's even easier. Like infinite scroll is the hard thing. Pagination's easy because you don't have to worry about windowing or anything. You have these buttons at the bottom, which are not buttons, they're links, and they link to a particular query param. And when the user clicks it, your loader is called, and your loader data comes back, and you just render the loader data. And so they click. It doesn't matter. You just update the query params, and Remix will automatically fetch the loaders for you. So that's way easier than infinite scroll. And if anybody wants to build an example and make a contribution to the Remix docs, be my guest, because that's something that a lot of people ask without realizing how easy it is. And what's cool is it works without JavaScript too. I should say it works before JavaScript. That's what I mean when I say it works without JavaScript. It works before JavaScript finishes loading. Okay, anyway, that's enough of scrolling on this thing. It's nuts. I love this. It's so cool. Okay. Okay, what is Remix? Yeah, thank you, Girish. Sweet. That answers all the questions that I've got. Anybody have questions? Oh, I just noticed somebody tried to chat something. Today I gave a talk about Remix in the Office with the Jokes app as a demo. Sweet. Congratulations. Okay, you can correct me because you're here. I'm gonna say Abesek. Abesek. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
No, you said it's fine. I want to know, like, how do you say it?
Abhishek. Abhishek.
Abhishek. Okay, so there's like a sh sound in there. Abhishek.
Yeah,
right?
it's okay. Yeah.
Close enough. I think people's names are important, and I want to say them right. And I do my best. So sweet. Anything else? So Grant is sending a message, but anybody have questions before we wrap up? Okay, we will all wait with bated breath as Grant finishes typing.
Hi, Ken.
Hello.
Hi. So I have a question regarding data fetching and state management. So I think you can do this with the React Query or SWR, but I'm trying to do it with pure React. So my problem is, so I have moved some data fetching logic to a custom hook, and then, for example, fetching settings, like making API call to settings API, and when my app get rendered, like the API get called from different components, like when the components get rendered. So then the problem is API get called, like it sends parallel API calls when the app get rendered. So how can I reduce that to one, and how can I basically stop like making parallel API request when multiple components like use that custom hook?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So let me make sure I understand. You've got a custom hook that is going to get data and that's like encoded in the hook. It's like what URL to hit to go get that data. And then you have two components that are rendered on the page at the same time that both use that hook. And so you're making two requests for that data because they're individually requesting them. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So first off, I'd say you wouldn't have this problem with Remix. So if it's possible, you should use Remix, but I realize not everybody can just rewrite their app to Remix right now. So secondly, I would say, but I do want to call that out just because like people need to realize that React isn't hard when you're using Remix. Yeah, like building React apps anyway. So the solution to this problem, and this is what useQuery does, or what React Query does in SWR, they have a cache that they update. And so when the hook runs, before it actually makes the request, it checks, is this already cached? And if it is, then it'll just return the data immediately. It doesn't need to make the request. And then you have to implement a bunch of stuff around like whether or not we should invalidate that cache at some point. Like caching can be a difficult problem, which is why it's really nice to just rely on the browser. And so I can just set the right cache headers. And so, yeah, the other thing is like, if you're rendering both of these hooks at the same time, then that data won't be in the cache yet because those requests are in flight. And so the other piece of this is you check the cache first, and then you say, if there's nothing in the cache, has anybody else started making the same request? And if they have, then just give me the promise that you gave them, and I will wait for that. I'll use that promise to grab the data. And then, so when both of them are fired off, one of them's going to happen before the other because JavaScript is synchronous. And so one's going to happen first, and then the other one's going to see, oh, that request is already sent. So I'll just wait on that promise, and then I'll have my data when it's done. And so those are the two things. And so the way that you set that up is through React Context. That's where you manage your cache and all of that stuff. But then again, you have to worry about invalidation. But from a fundamental level, that's the way that it works. Another thing that you could do, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what you want to do. Yeah, I suppose like the other fundamental problem with this is that it is a waterfall structure for getting your data. So when the user lands on the page, they have to go get the document, and then the document comes back and it has script tags on it. So then it gets the script tags, those come back, it runs the script tags, React starts rendering, and it says, oh, you've rendered this hook that needs to go get data. So now I will go get the data and I will come and get it back. And so like, that's the waterfall: get the document, then get the scripts, then get the data. What would be really cool is if you could just say, go get the document, and then go get the scripts and the data at the same time. Like, you just know that those are the things that you're going to need. And I do actually teach about this in Epic React in the Bookshelf app. I show you how to preload data as soon as the JavaScript starts executing. And that's a little bit better. React or Remix does a lot better with this because it will add link elements to the page. Well, first of all, it's server rendered, so it doesn't actually have this problem when you land on the page in the first place. But as you navigate around, we actually will prefetch the data for you before the user even clicks on the link. You opt into that, but yeah, we can do that. And so that ends up being way faster and eliminates this problem altogether, because you don't actually, within the component that needs the data, doesn't actually need to render any loading state, because it won't be rendered until the data is ready anyway. So yeah, it saves you a lot of time. Helps you a lot. So anyway, those are a bunch of thoughts around that. Does that answer like, I realize you probably can't necessarily rewrite your app to Remix today, But did I answer your original question of how to do this
Yeah,
without
yeah.
React Query?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's good.
sweet.
Yeah.
I realized that I probably answered that like in the first 20 seconds of my answer, and I can just be long-winded. So, but yeah, anyway, there you go. Okay, Grant is pulling his hair out. Don't pull your hair out. Like, it might not grow back. That happened to my father-in-law. He had like, he always calls them luscious locks. And his hair was a little long. And then one day he decided to just cut it all off. And then it didn't grow back, at least on the top. It just grew back on the sides. And he was really sad about that. Anyway, yeah, don't pull your hair out. I have an element that is supposed to disappear when the viewport is scrolled or resized. There's no fire event scroll. They attach the scroll event listener to the window object, the original code. Sorry, I'm afraid I'm not explaining well enough. Fellow BYU alum, woo! Okay. The catch is that I can't edit the file I'm testing. That's fine. Yeah, you normally shouldn't do that anyway. So here's the problem. There is not a fire event scroll, and there isn't. Huh. That actually is surprising to me. I would expect that there would be, because we have like all the events. Event map. Here we go. Scroll. Yep, there is. There's a fire event scroll. The problem, though, is that whatever you're doing, and the reason that it won't work is that I'm guessing that you're running in Jest, which most people who are using React Testing Library are. So this is not a React Testing Library limitation, as lots of people like to think that React Testing Library is limited. It's not. The problem is where you're running your tests. So you can run React Testing Library in the browser and you won't have this problem. But because you're running it in a simulated environment, a simulated JS DOM environment, it doesn't do layout computation. So everything has a height of 0 and a width of 0. Like nothing is laid out at all. And so the reason that what you're experiencing is because the viewport it's 0. There's no viewport. Nothing is laid out onto the page. You just are working with DOM nodes and it's invisible. And so that's why this isn't working, is because whatever you're using, whether it be a library or custom implementation, you're like measuring the viewport and stuff, but the viewport does there's nothing there. So you can mock things out to make this work, but really what you should be doing probably is use Cypress Testing Library with Cypress and run it in a real browser. That's what I always tell people. If you care about layout, you can go ahead and try and mock some things out. You can mock out resize, and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to be better off just testing it in a real browser. So this is, again, a JS DOM limitation. It's not a testing library limitation. And that's why I say when you do use a real browser, there's a testing library implementation for you there. And I suggest testing with Cypress and Cypress. And you can find Cypress Testing Library in here, and it's awesome. And you'll feel right at home. The biggest challenge is setting up the Cypress stuff, but that's it. Yeah, okay. And Aman is talking about virtualization. That's actually the infinite scroll thing I was doing, is virtualization. And I'm guessing that's what Grant's component is actually doing. And that's what he's trying to test, and that's not working because JS DOM doesn't support layout computation. So, okay, sweet. That's it. We have 9 minutes left, so I'm happy to hang out for a little bit. Otherwise, I've got remix stuff to do.
Hey, Kent.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
Great.
Sweet.
How can I help you, Renee?
Couple remix questions for you, if they're easy enough to answer. The first is, if you need something at like the top of the app, like the app loads up, and you want that to exist everywhere, is context still pretty much the way to go with that, even in remix?
Yeah. Sorry. So it depends on what it is. So if it's like if it's UI state, then we actually just merged a new feature into React Router yesterday that adds context prop to an outlet. And so the parent can share data to its children through context, through that context prop. So if it's UI state, then that's what you use that for. If it's a loader state, like stuff that came from the loader, and it needs to be shared, like this is the user, is a perfect example. And so it needs to be shared all throughout the app. Then you actually can access that through the use matches hook that Remix offers. And so I actually have an example of this in my site. If we go to, yeah, I actually originally tried just using context, like you're suggesting. That was like the thing. So I created this create simple context thing, which is actually pretty cool. And somebody maybe should make a library out of it. I'm not going to. I don't have time to maintain it, but it's really nice. And I had a bunch of these. And so this is a simple context that I created. And I had a bunch of these simple contexts until I realized that I could just use matches from Remix, and it has all of my loader data in it. And that was like primarily the stuff that I cared to share. So all I had left when I was done was just this one thing that had the sort order for the Chats with Kent episode. Here, I can show you exactly what that is. Because it's good to know, like, when should I do one or the other?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is all of this stuff is the parent, and the outlet just renders right here. And so as I switch between these different seasons, then these contents change and the URL changes. But this showing oldest first, showing newest first, that is in the parent. And so I need to share that UI state with these children, because this is not persisted in the URL. If I refresh, now we're back to oldest first. And I don't want to persist that in the URL. That doesn't make sense. So yeah, UI state, you use context. And with the new feature in React Router, it's not released yet, but when that is released, then that's what I will switch mine to. Is I'll just use the context from the outlet, because that's easier.
I'll check out use matches, because I think that's the use case, is like, oh, this is loader data that gets loaded when the app starts, and that needs to exist everywhere.
Yep, precisely. Cool. So the way that I do it is a little unique. So I want to talk about this really quick. So the way I do it is I have a special type that I've defined for my handle, which is kind of like, yeah, let me show you what handle is. I don't, have you used handle before?
No.
Okay, so this is a special thing you can export from your module, your route modules, that literally can be anything you want it to be. So we do, I think it has to be an object, maybe, I'm not sure. But outside of that, like, we don't really care. We don't touch it. All that we do is give it to you when you call use matches. So that's the original motivation behind this feature, was for breadcrumbs. So you could have the parent route that knows all of the, like, its children routes. And so you use this use matches to know what routes are active on the page, so you can lay out your breadcrumbs. But yeah, handle is has a lot of things that you can do with it. I also use it for my sitemap. So if we go to blog, my blog page, where is handle? Yeah, here it is. So I have this get sitemap entries. Oh, actually, let's do blog slug. There we go. Yeah, so I have this get sitemap entries that does all of the, go get all the blog posts and give me back the entries for my sitemap. So yeah, I have my own type for that, and I have this ID that I just made up. And so that makes it so that when I'm using use match loader data, I can just pass a handle ID. So I know I want the loader data for this particular thing, and it's a handle ID. Even if I move files around or anything, it won't change. It's always going to be that. And so then I find the right match data, or I find the right match based on that ID, and then I just return the match data. So this works, but I would do this differently. And I'm going to make an example in the future. What I would do is, instead of the handle ID, I just do the route ID. I think that, like, or the, not the route ID, but the route, the actual route, the URL for the thing that I'm looking for. And I think that just makes more sense to do it that way. Even if you do move files around and whatnot, like, I don't think it's that much of an ask to make sure you update anyone that's using those.
Yeah.
And to make it even better, if I have a route where I know that other people want to use my data, then instead of just having arbitrary use match loader data all over the place, I will actually put the hook right here. I'll say use blog slug data. And so this one will be responsible for that. So if I do move it, I can see, oh yeah, like I'm referencing this thing right here. So I need to update that. And so then other routes can import that hook and just say, I want the blog route data. What's cool about that as well is I have my loader data type right here. And so that can be nice and typed for me as well. So yeah, so that's how I do that.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
If you want to, you can build an example and contribute to the remix examples, because I only have so much time and it takes me a while to build all this stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I might try and find time to do that. Yeah, the other question, if it's brief enough, is
sorry, nothing's brief with me. I just talk too long.
I don't mind. Is your implementation of Tailwind, if you don't mind, like talking a little bit about that? Yeah, like I looked at like the official, like the remix way to do it, but obviously, like, there's a couple issues that are sort of floating around with like double reloads and files getting created. And I don't know if like you're running into that with your implementation using, I think it's like PM2 or something.
Yeah. So let me show you this. Let me do this really quick. Because it's been 10 days now. So yes, let's talk about the problem by itself.
Cool.
So Remix it allows you to import CSS files, but all that it does is it will copy that CSS file, put it into your public directory under build, and fingerprint it, so it gives it a hash in the file name, so that it can be cached forever. And then what you're importing is a URL for the file. That's all that Remix does for CSS right now. Eventually, we may actually build in support for Tailwind or something. That's in the future. We'll see what we end up doing there. But the reason that we do that is because it leads to the best user experience of anything else. I didn't say developer experience, I said user experience. Best user experience. And so we start with the best user experience, and then we try to make the developer experience better without making the user experience worse.
Chunking that up.
So that's the way that it works. And so because that is how it works, if you want to do any processing of your CSS before at all, from what you write to what Remix uses and copies over, then you have to do that out of band of Remix. And so you have to say, okay, well, I want to be able to use Tailwind, or I want to be able to use nesting, or I want to use SAS or whatever. All of that has to happen outside of Remix. And so the way that you think about it is we put our source files somewhere else, and then we point the CLI for whatever tool we're using to have it go ahead and build those files into the app directory. Like here, we put them into styles. So I've just got a README. So here, I'll pull up my my repo so you can see the built files as well. Okay, and let me bump this up a little bit. So here's my app directory, and my styles all get built into here. So this is the built version of all the styles. Here's my Tailwind thing that, like, remarkably, it seems like it's huge, but like this is all of the styles for my app are basically in here. I've got a couple of styles for stuff, but like that's actually pretty good for the size of app that I've got. So anyway, the source files are in the styles directory here. And so here's where I write out my Tailwind stuff and my imports for other things. All that stuff happens inside of the styles directory. And so then I have post CSS with a Tailwind plugin. Go ahead and build these from the styles directory into this styles directory in the app. And then my root here will, where's the styles? got to spell it right. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, for goodness sake. There it is. So those are the imports. They just import the built file. So when you clone it, it actually, you will have to make sure you run the build first. Otherwise, it won't, this won't work. So if you clone my project right now and don't run the build first and try to run the dev server, the first thing you're going to see is I can't find those CSS files. And then post CSS finishes, and then it's like, oh, actually, yes, I can. Never mind. So that's how that works. So let's talk about the double reload problem. So what happens with Tailwind is I've got Tailwind config right here that says I want to use the just-in-time compiler, which Tailwind version 3 just shipped, and this is the default, which is awesome.
Super, super cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so within this, I specify that my content is in the app directory, and it's all these files. And yeah. And so then the just-in-time compiler will look through all those files, find all the class names, and know what to include in the output when it saves the CSS. So what happens is when I change any file that matches this glob, Tailwind is going to rebuild, and it's going to say, oh, okay, let me check all the stuff and let me generate the CSS file, and I'm going to save it. The problem is that if I make a change that's like, whatever, that doesn't change any of the CSS, but Tailwind doesn't care. It's still going to rebuild because it just doesn't know. And so it just pessimistically rebuilds the whole CSS. And because I'm using post CSS, and I believe Tailwind has the Tailwind CLI basically does the same thing, it doesn't really care whether the contents of that CSS file will change. It's going to save it anyway. So it'll say, oh, I've generated all the CSS. The CSS is actually the same as what's in the file right now, but I'm going to save it. And so that triggers the reload because Remix has, we've imported this, and Remix is like, oh, that file changed, let me rebuild. So here's the big problem. This is why we get the double reload, is when I come over here and I change even like comment right here, Remix is like, oh, okay, I need to rebuild. And so it starts the rebuild. Tailwind is also like, oh, okay, we need to rebuild. So it starts the rebuild. So Remix finishes first because it's crazy fast because it uses ESBuild, and the page refreshes. And then Tailwind finally finishes and it saves the files, and Remix is like, oh, sweet, you saved a file again. Let me rebuild and get a refresh. So that's why we get the double refresh. So the solution, the solution that I am working on with this PR is I make it so that the post CSS CLI will first, before it actually outputs the file, it's first going to read the file. And if the current value is the same as what we're about to save, then we don't do anything. Otherwise, we'll save it. So this will solve that problem from that point of view, from that perspective. But we're probably still going to get double reloads until we do something else. Because what if I come down here and I actually do change something like dark block or something like, or black. Yeah, sure. Black, I guess. Yeah, if we do something like that, then my CSS actually does need to change. So I save the file. Remix is like, oh, sweet, you saved the file. Let me reload. And then Tailwind is like, oh, sweet, you saved the file. And even with my pull request in post CSS, it's going to say, oh, the CSS changed. So let's save it. So Remix is like, oh, you saved it. So let's reload again. So you'll get a double reload when the CSS actually does change.
Yep.
So we like with this PR, we solve part of the problem, but we still have that piece. So what Remix is going to do is, and this is actually not a huge challenge. I think it's just Ryan still needs to work on this. But what we're going to do is say, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah. So Remix says, oh, you changed the file. And Tailwind says, oh, you changed the file. Let me start building. Remix rebuilds, and it's really fast. And it says, okay, browser, you need to reload. Or actually what happens first is Remix says, oh, you changed the file. Hey, browser, I'm going to need you to reload soon. And so the browser sends like a console log, and then it rebuilds, and then it's going to go to the browser and say, okay, browser, I'm done rebuilding. You can go ahead and reload. And yeah, how is this going to work? So by the time, so this is what's going to happen. By the time that Remix finishes rebuilding, Tailwind has actually also told it that it needs to rebuild as well. I think the idea is that Tailwind will actually finish building in that time as well. And so it's going to also trigger another message that says, hey, you're going to need to reload soon. And so the browser says, hey, I know you told me that I need to refresh, but I got another message from you recently that said I'm going to need to refresh soon. So I'm going to ignore that. And I'm going to wait for that other build to finish before I do the reload. And so, yeah, anyway, so that's how that's going to work. And it actually, like I said, Ryan is planning on working on this, and it probably won't take a lot of work. But I'm pretty sure it will solve the problem of double refreshes. So the end.
Cool. So I guess follow-up, is your implementation the way you're working?
Oh, right. Yeah, let me finish.
Is that like your
Yeah.
workaround, or are you also getting those problems with that solution?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for asking about that, because I skipped that
That's
part.
what.
So my workaround basically will be unnecessary as soon as this PR is merged. My workaround basically does
Cool.
this by myself. So
Okay.
what my workaround does is, where's my, oh, right. I have it in the other directory. I have an other directory because I get so sick of putting stuff at the root. So if it doesn't have to be in the root, then I put it in the other directory. So my PM2 config is right here. And I have like a big comment explaining sort of what's going on. So I'm using PostCSS and it's building, and where PostCSS builds to is actually in the other directory in postcss.ignored. I have a git ignored that ignores everything that has a dot ignored in the file name. I advise this. It's great. I use dot ignored for like temporary files and directories all the time.
Cool.
So, so then in tandem with this, I also have Rsync, which I don't understand at all, but apparently it's magical. But Rsync will, anytime there is a change, so this is actually PM2 is watching the post CSS ignored. So anytime there's a change in that directory, PM2 is going to call this. And what Rsync will do is it will say, copy everything in there that's in there into app styles. But it's not going to copy anything that is already there. That's basically what it's doing. So if the contents of what's in there is exactly the same as what you're going to copy, then don't bother copying it at all. I think that's what the checksum is for. I copied this from somebody else.
Great. That makes
So,
sense.
yep.
And then, okay, so is this a okay way to look at it? Is PM2 kind of a fancy, more modern gulp type thing? It's like a
not exactly. PM2
no.
is more a process manager, where it allows you to run multiple processes in parallel in the same terminal window. And it also is a watcher as well, so you can tell it, watch this, and when this is the files in this directory changes, or files that match this glob change, then run the script again. So you can actually say watch nothing. Here, actually, I'm doing this here. No. Yeah, so I'm doing this here. I'm saying don't watch anything, because Remix is doing the watching by itself. So
Gotcha.
this will only ever run once because it's a long living script. But yeah, PostCSS, it's not a long running script. It just runs once, and so I have it watch all this other stuff for me.
Cool. And
So,
then
yeah, so it pretty
last
much is just like running multiple scripts at the same time.
Yeah.
That's all it does.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll look at that. Super last thing. Did you see the little discussion about like the dead files that are created?
Yeah, and I have experienced that before.
You have?
I looked at that. Let's see, where is it? Build. I look at that occasionally in my own project, and I haven't seen it again.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there it is. Oh no,
Yeah.
actually those are real. My app is kind of big, and I could probably optimize the way things get chunked for my app too. But yeah, I have seen it before, but I haven't seen it recently myself.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that. That was happening a lot for me. It was like every every build caused like a new file to get created. So my like build folder was getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, yeah, that's super
Or my
weird.
temporary build folder or whatever.
And there's an issue open for that, right?
I think it's just a discussion and it's just the person who said, hey, I'm noticing this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I
should
just
probably
noticed
open
that
an
the
issue
other day.
for that, or at least somebody should investigate that and figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
Because
I'll run,
I have seen it before, but it's been a long time since I've seen it happen to me.
yeah, I'll run my project, and if it's still happening, I'll go ahead and kind of transfer that over to an issue. But if it's not happening, I'll at least comment on that discussion to say it seems to be gone.
Okay, cool. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no sweat. Thanks for all of that. That was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you. All right. This is fun. Thanks everybody for hanging out. So let's see. I believe next week. Yeah, I should be around next week. Let me double check. I don't think I put it in my cancellations. Yeah. So pretty sure I'll be around next week. And then the week after that, of course, it's Christmas Eve. Not a chance, folks. So yeah, it'll be 2022 probably would be the next time. Maybe, probably. So yeah, but I will see you all next week.